Thank you, everybody. Thank you. I've got a couple of opening remarks, and then we'll get this panel started. So I wanted to open this up with privacy is a human fight. The developers of Samourai Wallet have been on the front lines of this battle for several years, and they've been making great sacrifices in that fight lately. They were recently indicted. They both had pre-dawn raids conducted on their residences. There's multi-millions of dollars involved in their bonds. And this fight continues to escalate. There have been multiple federal agencies mobilized against the people around the Samourai Wallet developers, doing things like auditing individuals, using the IRS to audit individuals, using the legal branch to send subpoenas to other people to try and coerce information out of them. So the fight is escalating. But Bitcoin is software. Software is code. Code is speech. And speech is a God-given right. And that is worth fighting for. So this fight is going to continue. And if any federal agency thinks that they're going to encroach on an individual's right to use Bitcoin the way they see fit to do collaborative transactions, I've got some news for the DOJ. They can go fuck themselves. So with that, we're going to get this panel started. We've got Tor Ekeland, who was working on the defense team with the Bitcoin Fog case. We've got Zack Shapiro, the executive director of P2P Rights Foundation. And we've got Diverter, the author of Mining for the Streets, the man, the myth, the legend himself. So let's give everybody a big round of applause. And, you know, with that, I just want to start this off like with the real basics. So I want everyone in the audience to know what Samourai Wallet is and what's unique about it and what that does. So I think I'll pass that first question off to you, Diverter.
Sure. So most of you probably have a pretty decent idea of Samourai Wallet. The goal of Samourai Wallet was to be on the bleeding edge of Bitcoin privacy, and they stayed there for the entire existence of the wallet. It was the first mobile wallet on Android to natively integrate Tor into the wallet. We also had several different transaction types that the goal was to introduce entropy, was to confuse the chain surveillance firms that are attempting to encroach on user rights more and more by tracing the Bitcoin blockchain. And so the idea was to develop this wallet that was privacy-centered first. The motto was, it was a Bitcoin wallet for the streets. So the main difference in my head was a lot of Bitcoin wallets are constructed to help users hold Bitcoin. Because the idea is you want to acquire Bitcoin and you want to hold it securely. Samourai Wallet, on the other hand, they wanted it to be a wallet that helped people actually use Bitcoin. So they wanted to help with your transactions. They wanted to help with your transactional privacy and enable you to actually use Bitcoin and maintain some privacy while you did that. So it was an Android wallet, privacy first, and most importantly in my mind, it was fully and completely non-custodial. So there was never a point when any user funds were ever held by Samourai Wallet. No funds were ever on any nodes anywhere. It was a fully self-custodial wallet. So that's kind of the basic rundown.
And I want to point out, if you look at the backs of your chairs, you'll see a transaction graph. That's a Whirlpool transaction from Samourai Wallet's implementation of CoinJoin, Whirlpool. And so, you know, we've also seen an escalation on the front lines of this battle for privacy, and there have been a couple of other cases like Tornado Cash and Bitcoin Fog. And Tor, you were involved with Bitcoin Fog. Can you speak to some of the similarities and differences in those cases and what we're seeing today with Samourai Wallet?
Yeah, I think actually the biggest difference between Bitcoin Fog and Samourai Wallet is that Bitcoin Fog was a custodial mixer, so they actually took control of your funds. What I think is a significant escalation and is so scary about this prosecution is that it's a prosecution of a non-custodial mixer. So that's why if you look at this indictment, the charges are only conspiracy charges. They're not actually being charged with having laundered any money. They've just been charged with conspiring to do it. And you may have heard that conspiracy is the prosecutor's friend. And when I see an indictment that only has conspiracy charges in it, it raises my eyebrows. I think that's the biggest difference, is that it's a prosecution of a non-custodial mixer, and it represents a significant sort of aggressive step in this administration's attack on financial privacy. And essentially, I think, just to wrap up my comments on this, that what they're doing is they're trying to regulate and legislate by indictment in a space where the law is completely unclear because it's undeveloped, because the law can't handle the new paradigm that Bitcoin presents.
Yeah, that's a great point. Diverter and Zach, do you have any follow-up thoughts on that? Like any of the previous guidance we've seen from like FinCEN and any points you want to make?
Yeah, absolutely. So main message I want to get out today is the stakes of this case and why this is so incredibly important, not just for privacy, but for the Bitcoin ecosystem in general. Privacy is in the name of this talk. Privacy is what brought a lot of folks to the stage, and privacy is probably why some of you are sitting in the audience, but it goes much further than that. So if you look at the charges that were brought against the defendants in Samourai and also in Tornado Cash, right, where these non-custodial tools are being treated as if they were custodial, they're both being charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering, which is a difficult thing for the government to prove. You have to show that someone knowingly laundered funds, right, that there's an intent element, but then that they also ran a unlicensed money service business. So what is a money service business? A money service business is a financial institution that is regulated under the Bank Secrecy Act from 1970 as highly augmented by the Patriot Act in the aftermath of 9/11. And the government is trying to stop institutions from being involved in money laundering by saying, if you are in the business of moving money on behalf of other people, then you have certain KYC AML obligations. That's why when you go to Coinbase, you have to give up your firstborn child to get an account. However, we've had guidance since 2013 from the body that, by the way, you need to get a license from, called FinCEN, which is a part of the US Treasury, of what entities in the Bitcoin and crypto space are or are not money transmitters. And the guidance from FinCEN is a money transmitter is an entity that accepts and transmits value on behalf of someone else. So we were just talking before about what a coin join is, but in even more basic terms, what a coin join is a collaborative transaction by a bunch of Bitcoin users where you are sending Bitcoin from one address that you own to another address that you own with nobody in the middle. No one's custodying your funds. No one's holding your Bitcoin. It just moves on the blockchain. And then there is usually a coordinator, which could be a sort of decentralized protocol, or in the case of Samourai, it could be a centralized party that basically acts as a bulletin board, right? It says, okay, there are a bunch of you that want to create a private transaction for 5 million sats at a time. So we're going to find 5 people or so that all want to make sure that they have 5 million sats that are not just easily traceable to their Coinbase address. We're going to queue up a transaction between those 5 people using a partially signed Bitcoin transaction where they're all going to move it at the same time as part of the transaction. And the funds aren't really like mixed in any meaningful way, right? When we hear the term mixer, most people think about what Bitcoin Fog was, which is basically an address that collects Bitcoin from people and then sends out outputs to other people. That's not what a coin join is. A coin join is just a collaborative transaction where people move their own Bitcoin from one address they hold to another. So you tell me who's the money transmitter in this case, right? And this is not just true of coin joins. This is any non-custodial tool. If you're using a non-custodial tool, you are the money transmitter. Non-custodial peer-to-peer tools are operated by their users. They're not operated by a company. And so by charging the defendants in Tornado Cash and Samourai with this crime, the DOJ is completely missing how this technology works, right? Which, first of all, is unfair and a violation of due process, and they deserve to lose, at least on that charge, on those grounds. But then what's worse than that is the theory that comes out of the DOJ winning on these cases, and unfortunately we saw this in the Tornado Cash case in their recent briefing. They realized, okay, this doesn't really sound like what FinCEN said money transmission is, so we're going to say that FinCEN's rule is not broad enough. It's not that you have to accept and transmit value. Anyone who facilitates the movement of someone else's money is now a money transmitter. Well, let's think about, just in the Bitcoin ecosystem, who facilitates other people's movement of money. When miners move your Bitcoin by adding it to the blockchain, are they facilitating the movement of money? Maybe. What about Lightning routing nodes? What about when you use your Ledger or Cold Card hardware wallet and you use someone else's node to move your transaction onto the blockchain? What about just using the physical hardware wallet? What about if I'm handing cash to Tor and I use a paper envelope to hold the cash? Is the company that chopped down the tree to make that paper envelope facilitating my movement of money? Like, the point is, there is no limiting principle. If the rule is any facilitation of movement of money is effectively money transmission and therefore subject to the Bank Secrecy Act, and it's not just companies this applies to, but code and even something as silly as a paper envelope, that's a ban on non-custodial Bitcoin technology. That's not just a threat to privacy, that's an existential threat, very similar to the stuff that we see Elizabeth Warren putting in her anti-Bitcoin bills. So privacy is important. This case is partly about privacy, but I just want to underscore how important the precedent that this case sets is for the future of our industry, for anyone who wants to use Bitcoin in a sovereign way.
Yeah, and what's really important about the work being done at the P2P Rights Foundation is that the precedent set in this case, just to spell this out, it could potentially mean that miners are considered money transmitters, node operators are considered money transmitters, Lightning routing node operators are considered money transmitters. And so if you value the tools that you're using in the Bitcoin ecosystem, step up to the plate, draw some bold red lines and defend those lines and get in the fight. Go to p2prights.org and contribute to the Samourai Wallet Defense Fund. This is the important fight, and things are going to get rapidly out of control if they don't win. And
yeah, just real quick on that. I mean, please do, if you're considering it, donate to the P2P Rights Foundation. So first, there's a defense fund specifically for Samourai, but unfortunately, these are not going to be the last cases where these issues come up. And we've been talking about custodial versus non-custodial. There's another element of this with products that are custodial but decentralized. So in the Bitcoin space, think the Liquid network, which has a federation. Think about federated eCash mints. That's going to be the next fight, right? If they are accepting and transmitting your value, who's the they? Is there a tightly enough coordinated group that they're going to be treated as money transmitters? Like, this is really going to be a broad thing. And so the idea behind the P2P Rights Foundation is to develop a war chest of money so we can go to people who are building Bitcoin tech, give them free or low-cost regulatory advice. We can write amicus briefs to explain to judges and prosecutors how this technology actually works, draw from people who work with the technology and understand it to bridge that education gap, defend people when they're wrongfully prosecuted, and eventually, if we raise enough, the ideal is to be able to bring our own cases, right? In cases where there's alleged money laundering, there are a lot of people who look down on that, but these tools are used by human rights activists, they're used by all sorts of actors, and when those people's rights are infringed and we bring lawsuits on their behalf, we saw, with the Grayscale ETF case, that can be an incredibly powerful tool in the toolkit. So this is a long-term vision, and this is really meant to be money that is used to protect Bitcoin and really be laser-focused on the principle that peer-to-peer tools should be regulated as if they are peer-to-peer, rather than as if there was some financial institution in the middle.
Let's back up for a minute. Let's go back to April 24th. Who can tell me what happened on April 24th?
I think a lot of people got real nervous. April 24th was the day that the authorities ended up arresting both Wallet Guy and TDev. The issue obviously is very it's very tragic for this precedent to get set because it affects a lot of people. And when we talk about affecting a lot of people, we're not only talking about it affects your ability to like use Bitcoin in the way that you want to, but you also have to take into account that the people that it's really affecting even more are the people that have poured their entire livelihoods into this stuff. Samourai Wallet was one of the most community-driven grassroots projects in the entire Bitcoin space. It spawned another completely grassroots, community-driven project called Ronin Dojo. We had another project that ended up getting scooped up that was called OXT, where we were doing our own blockchain surveillance, but we were doing it in a self-defense manner. We wanted to give you the same tools that were being used against you. So there's several different things that has been affected by this. Samourai donated to the Tor Foundation whenever they needed money. Samourai funded arts projects, funded a film about 3D gun printing. You know, so this touches so many aspects, and it's people's livelihoods, and you pour your heart and your soul into this stuff because, as I'm sure a lot of the people sitting here are very passionate about Bitcoin. You've got to imagine your ability to give up everything else, walk away from what's most likely a very well-paying job or career to go chase this dream of doing something you want. And then when you finally get it and you run this amazing project for 9 years and then wake up randomly on April 24th, and your entire life changes, and the entire lives of everyone that you've been working with, all the people that have you know kind of grown to love this project and love you as people, it changes your entire worldview overnight. So it's obviously a tragic thing, but I think they have activated a lot of people that previously were not that active. That maybe liked Bitcoin, but and we're kind of dipping their toes into it. But now we see the overreach when it really hits home, and you see how they just step over their own guidance. They step wherever they feel like, and it really it's like a shot to the gut, you know. And the worst part is, having known these guys, these are such good people, man. That's what really gets me, is they are genuinely good people. And meanwhile, the criminals that are actually doing like hacking or real money laundering, things of that effect, they're not facing 25 years in a federal prison right now. Only the guys that wrote some software that some criminals allegedly used. So it's a crazy, crazy thing, and it's really it's just sad. There's no other word for it. It's sad.
I mean, in almost every other area of technology, the law treats it as neutral, right? If someone uses a MacBook Pro to commit credit card fraud, no one thinks that, you know, the Apple executives need to go to prison, right? And it is one thing if you have the goods on someone and you're like, look, this person knowingly, intentionally helped someone launder money. That was their objective, right? It is understandable why the government would treat that as a crime. It is completely different if you're providing a neutral tool where you do not have any control or even knowledge about who's using it, and it's just a neutral piece of infrastructure, and then you're thrown in jail for that when no one had given you any notice that this is how the regulations were going to work.
Yeah.
But I think that touches on the arbitrary nature of these prosecutions, and I think if you care for no other reason about these prosecutions, is you should care about the fact that this could be you. I've been doing computer defense against the federal government for the last decade, and I have never seen such an arbitrary application of somebody's arbitrary interpretation of the law, because the law just doesn't know how to deal with this kind of stuff. And you've got agents who see that, you know, a crypto prosecution is good for my career. Now, I've got this completely undeveloped space where it's just, you know, anarchy. The SEC is suing people under the theory that Bitcoin is a security. At the same time, the CFTC is suing somebody under the theory that it's a commodity. Nobody knows what's going on. The people who are making the regulations don't understand the space. That is a recipe for an ambitious prosecutor to look at what you're doing and indict you under a conspiracy charge or whatever. I mean, here you've got these, they're on the hook for, I don't know, a couple $1 billion worth of money laundering, and they haven't touched the money. And their app was on the Google Android store. So if you care for no other reason, you should care that this could be you, and you should fund this defense, because this is one of the cases that's on the front line battling it out against this kind of arbitrary, whimsical application of the law.
Yeah. And just one thing that I'm kind of torn on at sometimes is I'm devastated that this is happening to these guys, not only because they're good people, but these are my friends. And I don't throw that word around very lightly. These are genuinely my friends. So it's tragic. It's heartbreaking to me to see them have to go through this. At the same time, a decent part of me is glad it's them. If it was going to be anybody that had to stand up and fight this fight, I'm glad it's these guys, because these are two guys that I promise you're not going to push them around. You're not going to make them cop a plea to something just to get out of some prison time. This is what they're built for. These guys are built this way. So I'm really glad in that, in a way, that these are the guys that we have fighting for us. And we just need to support them in every way that we can, try to get the word out as much as we can, raise as much money as we can. We want to show them that they're not alone. They have fought for us, and they fought for users' rights and the users' ability to transact privately, and now we need to be the ones to come out and fight for them.
Yeah. Well said. Let's get a round of applause. We want to keep the conversation going around Samourai Wallet. We do not want them to be forgotten about. There's a banner hanging over there with the hashtag #FreeSamourai. If you search that hashtag on the socials, you will be led down a rabbit hole with a lot of resources where you can learn more about what's been going on, the timeline of events, and ways that you can help out and contribute and support the defense fund of Samourai Wallet. And again,
one other thing about the fund, so definitely, once again, please contribute if you can. If you are someone who is building in Bitcoin and you are worried about what this case means for you, please come find me. I'm happy to talk to you. I fielded a whole bunch of calls in the week after this indictment dropped about what this means. And one of the worst things about this prosecution that we haven't talked about is the chilling effect, right? We've seen Wasabi shut down their CoinJoin. We've seen Sparrow leave the United States, Phoenix leave the United States. Yep. We have all of these different companies that are, even before there's a verdict, even before anyone has ruled on this stuff, it's already having a chilling effect, and it's really important to stop that from happening. So please use the fund as a resource if you are a builder who needs to understand, how these regulations may or may not apply to you.
And honestly, I think that chilling effect is bad for our economy, because it's just keeping companies from working in America. All this stuff is just going offshore, and something like 90% of the users of mixers are using them for legitimate privacy reasons. So, this isn't even a huge issue, because most money laundering is done in fiat currency. Why? Because you can, kind of trace, transactions on the blockchain if you're not mixing or whatever. But this is also an overblown problem, right? It's way much bigger problem in the fiat currency world. So I just think this is ham-handed regulation by indictment, and they're usurping Congress's role in passing statutes in this space, which there are none, and we're just falling victim to this just massive bureaucratic law enforcement machine called DOJ, with a bunch of ambitious prosecutors who want to get their name on a press release and in the papers as the crypto prosecutor.
I want to get closing thoughts from all three of you. Before we do, I'd like to open it up very briefly for questions. If we can do 2 minutes of questions. If anyone's got a question, there's a microphone up here. So just raise your hand and they'll come around.
Hey, how do you think the recent Supreme Court case, Hackett, where they judged against the EPA and regulations, will affect this case going forward?
Was that the Chevron?
Yeah, that's Chevron deference, right? They killed Chevron deference. I think it's too early to tell, but I'm glad they killed Chevron deference because that's, I think, a big part of the problem here is, the whole reason for Chevron deference is because these regulators were supposed to be better experts in the space so that the federal courts are supposed to defer to these scientific experts. But if you look in the blockchain space and what they've done in the last decade or not done, it's a fucking disaster. They don't know what they're talking about. They're still using 20th century financial paradigms, and we're being regulated by securities laws from 1930, meant for something completely different. I welcome it. I just don't know what's going to happen with it.
So I think also on balance, I think it's probably a good thing not to have Chevron deference, and it forces Congress to be more deliberate in lawmaking. Ironically, in this case, I think it hurts us. One of the sort of most shocking pieces of these prosecutions is that the industry has had 11 years of FinCEN guidance to rely on that was actually constructive and reasonable, all things considered, at drawing a line between custodial and non-custodial tools, right? The line from FinCEN's 2019 guidance, which is the most recent one, is you need to have total independent control of others' funds in order to be a money service business and money transmitter. And unfortunately, in these particular cases, it means that other than from a due process perspective, which is absolutely real, everyone was relying on this guidance, in terms of an interpretation perspective of, the judge in this case interpreting the Bank Secrecy Act, I do think, unfortunately, the Supreme Court case gives the judge a little bit more cover to disregard the 11 years of FinCEN expert guidance we've had on this.
Thank you. Do we got time for one more question? Any hands?
If y'all are informed about the Roger Ver extradition and arrest, would you have any comments on people who got into Bitcoin early having to take a closer look at their transactions early on and what that means for individual holdings?
That's what got Raman, man. Raman Sterlingoff got into Bitcoin in 2010. I think best I can tell is he did a transaction with somebody who started Bitcoin Fog. They said he ran Bitcoin Fog. He was convicted for it, even though no evidence at trial ever came out of him ever operating Bitcoin Fog. I would be really worried about your early Bitcoin transactions and who you interacted with, and I would worry about Chainalysis going back and saying, oh, that is you gave a Bitcoin to Hamas in 2011. And yeah, I think I saw it, right? Like I can't believe I'm saying it, but yeah, I think you need to worry about your early Bitcoin transactions and who you transacted with, because I just did a case where a guy was found guilty based on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're in the fortunate position of holding on to Bitcoin you've had for a really long time, it's worth the investment. Talk to a lawyer who understands Bitcoin.
Thanks, you guys. 10 seconds each. Let's get some closing thoughts. Tor, go ahead.
Free Samourai, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, what else can we say? Free the guys. And to Zach's earlier point, I just want to really quickly, don't allow the narrative to be shaped that the reason that Samourai is getting prosecuted is because they were especially bad. I've seen that, the people that talk, well, they were spicy on Twitter, they did this, they did that. And so the narrative is trying to be spun that this prosecution is selective because Samourai was especially bad. Don't allow that to creep into your mind. Understand that this is a far broader fight than just privacy. It's about non-custodial tools in general. And lastly, really quick, we want to keep the word out. We want to keep we want to keep this in the front of people's minds. So we got a guy here, one of my friends. He has some shirts and some hoodies, like I've got on here. It says Free Samourai. I've got a nice little graphic and stuff on the back. We're giving them away. We just want people to wear them. If you'd like to pay for them, you can pay $30 a T-shirt, $40 a hoodie, and all that will go straight to the P2P Rights Award. But we just want to get them on the backs of some supporters. And so he'll be around here if you're looking to do that. Thank you.
I think if you take nothing else away, the meme I would like to come from this is that non-custodial tools are run by their users. They're not run by the people who wrote the code, right? The short version of this is no MSBs without keys. But if you are using a non-custodial tool where you are using your keys to sign, you are the money transmitter, not the guy who built the tool, and the law needs to understand that.
Let's give these guys a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Free Samourai.
Free Samourai.
Free the guys.